just like his younger brother, Cave Digger, for the PSVR2, the updated title, Cave Digger 2, Dig Harder, take the stand. Are you worth the hours of investment? Are you worth the $25 price tag? Your future is in my hands. I first consider the count of, did I play that? And this is going to sound so mean, but it must be said. A 10-hour game based on mining ore with a pickaxe sounds like maybe one of the worst ideas I have ever heard of for a video game. Seriously, could you think of a more boring concept? Why not VR, a ant farmville, or fishing at a pond VR? The idea is just so bad that I wouldn't have touched this with a 10-foot pole if I didn't review it. And I'm sure you are thinking the same thing, but I have to admit the execution is actually pretty well done. There's enough shooting, digging, mining, panning for gold, secrets, that although on paper this sounds like a horribly dull game, it's respectable and at times, especially with the multiplayer, pretty fun. Because of this, on the count of, did I play that? Well, yes, I did. And I call you guilty. Alex, you were one of the multiplayer friends I played this with. Any input or questions you have about maybe the theory or on paper, the concept, the source material of this game?
I think any game can be distilled to its basic concepts and make it sound boring. You're just mining for ore, whatever. This does have a bit of interesting stuff. I liked Cave Digger 1 for the kind of randomized dungeons that you'd go in and mine. I liked that this one incorporated some shooting, so there's enemies to add some spice to it. The shooting was pretty well done and kind of enjoyable. And they added just some extra things like the mining and panning and stuff. Really, the ultimate goal is to build out your town, and you're mining to get money so you can build out your town. But you can distill it, make it sound boring, but like you said, there's a lot going on there, and a surprising amount going on there, and I had a decent enough time with it. Do you think that it? I don't know. Did you think it was fun? What you did?
I think initially it's fun. However, and one thing, I was the one to officially review the game. You played it for a little bit, but then you had to move on. I continued to play it for about 10 hours. So it gets boring. It also isn't much of a town you're building out. Initially, you think that's the goal, and there are multiple endings of the plot, but there's also very little plot. Things I'll dive in here in a little bit. And I would say the first 3 hours was fun. And then after that, other than very small little things, like when you upgrade your gun, it's cool to shoot people once and just have them, die in one hit, things of that nature. It just runs old and it's not as much fun as the beginning. But it's still, like I said, for what it's worth, the execution was pretty good. And moving on to the two counts, mind you, of Deja Poo. I reviewed Cave Digger, and now I've reviewed Cave Digger 2. Like I said, I've reviewed it twice, once on the PSVR, and now Cave Digger 2 on the PSVR 2. And it now has a few new wrinkles, some new weapons, the areas, but it's so incredibly similar to the first game. I don't know if this type of game really should be a series, and it seems as though they're going to make it a series. And I'll admit, Cave Digger 2 on the PSVR 2 is way better, primarily because of the analog sticks. Those puppies are game-changing. The haptic feedback and head rumble are there, but they're very minimal. There is a plot, but I've played this for 8 to 10 hours, and I only have half of the comic books that tell the story. And to elaborate on this, you go into a cave. Once you reach the end of a level, there are some safes. The safes are where you crack the riddle. You open this bad boy, and the safe, you get treasures, and sometimes there's a page of a comic book that tells the plot. The plot isn't revealed to you immediately. The narrator doesn't tell you about the plot. You may have no idea what the plot is unless you read the comic books. And there's 25 of these comic book pages altogether, but it takes so long to get them. If I've spent 8 to 10 hours getting half of them, and I almost fully upgraded everything. It's just I don't know if it's really worth going through there just to see the plot. It does have multiple endings, I think four of them, if I'm correct. It's also it's essentially the same game as the very first one with some enhancements and some enemies, and it's just I don't know. It's a bit disappointing. Again, for this type theory for a game, personally, I think there should only be one good one. Cave Digger 2 should be the only mining game for the PSVR, and it would be okay. Touch wood if there's a third one. Please, like, please no. The game isn't bad. Like, developers have skill. Work on something else, man. But on the two counts of Deja Vu, Cave Digger 2, I find you guilty.
So, I mean, I will say that the little bit I played of Cave Digger 2, it does feel better than Cave Digger 1. That's true. Although, like you kind of alluded to, it feels like just a better version of the same game that Cave Digger 1 was. Although Cave Digger 2 does have multiplayer, and I had a good time playing multiplayer with you, but mostly because it was you and I trying to figure out what in the world's going on in the game. So, I feel like there's a good game there from what I played, but like you said, it's if they're gonna do a Cave Digger 3 that's just like Cave Digger 2, but like a little bit better, I'm not necessarily want to see that because we can talk about it more after the next one, but there's stuff that maybe could be added to it. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. So finally, I want to move to it's not crack cocaine, it's malachite. Although I've made it clear on the worries about the source material of the game, I have to admit something about this gameplay loop that is addictive. I love the fact that it's not overstimulating. It's almost more meditative than anything. You don't need to try too hard. It doesn't challenge you too much. You know what you're going to get. You can just kind of veg out and play. If you hook up with multiplayer, it's a great time trying to steal items from each other, moving through caves twice as fast, racking up the coin, the gold, maybe some comic books. The enemies are cool. However, they reuse the same enemies throughout the entire game, just with different colors and slightly upgraded abilities. I wish I could describe how the first hour was really fun, but then it started to get to the point where I wasn't having as much fun. But I was like, I do the cave. I'm like, okay, that wasn't that fun. But then in my mind, I'm like, okay, just one more cave. Let me just do one more. And now, don't get me wrong, you're not going to binge this game. In fact, I played two caves 2 or 3 times a day. So and I did that for over a week. So one cave takes around 20 to 30 minutes if you do it right and you're thorough. So playing this way still makes it fun because you're not binging it. You're not getting too much of it at one time. And it's actually a pretty decent little workout. And that way it also doesn't burn you out. So maybe Alex can describe it a little better. I don't know why, but it is fairly addicting. And the one good thing about it is you 100% are going to get your money's worth if you finish the game. If you get all the comic books, you at least have over 10 hours worth of gameplay, $25, very good value on that. So before I go to my final verdict, and actually I'll give my verdict right here on the count of it's not crack cocaine, it's malachite, I find you guilty. Alex, what do you think? Can you describe? Did you feel the addictive nature of this when you played?
Yeah, and part of it's like the kind of randomization, right? I mean, it feels good to hack into the wall with a pickaxe and gold pops out and you get that gold and, that just feels like you're progressing something, right? You want to see the numbers go up. They added a bit more here too where there's some exploration, right? There's like some zip lines and there's some like vines that you can climb on. So the exploration is fun and it's kind of exciting, but the downfall is that every time I kind of did that exploration, what I got as a reward was kind of not too exciting. It might have just been more gold to throw into my sack and not like a lot more gold. Not like, oh, you found the secret. Guess what? You've just gotten 10 times what you normally would. It was just like, oh, here's like an extra crystal. It's like I would have had much more fun just blowing past that and coming back to the cave again and getting that kind of thing. as far as like the enemy variety, I encountered some various enemies, and they were interesting initially, but then they kind of, I don't know, kind of became more of a nuisance than an obstacle. Like you said, shooting the enemies. Like now, I shoot the enemies. I got to wait for them to blow up before I can go near them. There's like mechanics of turning on, lighting the torches in each cave that doesn't really seem to matter that much. But again, I didn't get as far as you. I will say in Cave Digger 1, there's like some weird story stuff that was happening that was intriguing. And I would hope that Cave Digger 2 kind of spells that out a bit more. Like, I was affecting change in Cave Digger 1 that I didn't quite understand until I got to the end of the game. And that was exciting and that was interesting. I feel like Cave Digger 2 is not doing that because the scope is wider, so there's less stuff that you can kind of mess up. But again, it feels like these mechanics are really good, but I kind of get tired of what I'm doing with them pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was really disappointed that there aren't new enemies. I mean, there are essentially one, two, three, maybe four or five enemies in the game. And then each level, they just change their skins and they have a little more HP. They even have the same attacks. Like it's really sad. I'm like, why? But it is
I
what it is. I do appreciate the addicting gameplay. I like upgrading. You start to become overpowered. You just make, and then that lets you make more money, and then you become even more overpowered. Like I like that aspect of it. So it has something going on
I
for it.
think one good example of this though is like when you and I were playing, we saw that mountain and it was like, hey, let's climb this mountain. And we found all these ropes. We climbed the mountain to the top, thinking there's going to be something at the top. And it was fun to climb the mountain, but when you get to the top, all there was a zip line to get you back down to the bottom.
Yeah,
There wasn't
yeah,
anything up there to do. There was no reason to go up the mountain, and it's not like the environment was big, but it's not like breathtaking or anything. It's just that kind of stuff. There's so much stuff that's like interesting. Let me go see what that's about. It's about nothing. Okay, there we go.
yeah. Absolutely. I think it's time to go on to our final verdict.
That's right.
So, on these three counts and the final verdict of determining if you are a worthy PSVR2 title to put your precious time and money into, I find you, Cave Digger 2, Dig Harder, hung